Anyway, just first, let me introduce myself. I'm Professor Thomas Duvernay from Yeongnam University down in Gyeongsan, which is about 3.5 hours drive from here. Gyeongsan is just outside of the city of Daegu, so right next to a very major city. As a matter of fact, my apartment is one where live in Gyeongsan, I can walk to Daegu, so it's kind of nice. Just go over the border. Let me just introduce myself a little bit. I first came to Korea 40 years ago, 1984. And at that time I was teaching high school in the city of Gyeongju. Yeah, have all of you been to Gyeongju? Been to Gyeongju? Anyway, and that's my wife, who's over there reading books right now. And that's her hometown, is Gyeongju. She also is a teacher, and that's actually how we met. She was a high school teacher. She was the science teacher at that time. Got married 40 years ago. So been together for a while. She's not tired of me yet, I guess. Anyway, we moved back to the States for a while. I taught college in my home state of Michigan for a few years, and then we returned to Korea with our then young son in 1989. Our then young son, now he's a professor at do you know Huf's Waydae in Korean? It's the Hankuk University of Foreign Studies is what it stands for. He's a professor at that university. Yeah, well, yeah. Teaching is in the blood. And my son actually is a very good Korean traditional archer too. He's actually better than I am. Freddie knows that. Yeah, Freddie. Yeah, he's a musician also. He's a professor and a musician. He's had several bands. But anyway, we came back here in 1989, and at that time I was teaching, as I said, I was teaching at the Gyeongju campus of Dongguk University, and I taught there for 15, 16 years. I forget exactly. Then I moved over to Pohang, and I taught at a university there for a few years. And then in 2009, to Gyeongsan, where I've been teaching at Yeongnam University since 2009. Back in 1993 is when I first started Korean traditional archery, so 31 years ago. And before that, I actually learned how to shoot Western style when I was young. I actually first started, like many young people in the States would start, summer camp, right? And a cheap fiberglass bow that we'd shoot. I think I was 7 or 8 years old maybe when I first shot a bow. And it was just one of those things I thought, I really kind of like this. When I came over to Korea, when I returned to Korea, and my son was about 6 years old at that time, I was trying to think of a hobby that he and I could do together. And I was thinking, when I was just a little bit older than him, that's when I first drew a bow. So I thought, that might be a nice father and son hobby. Yeah. And I was able to find a place that sold Western style bows, and I was especially thinking in Korea that'd be a great place because 1988 Olympics, Korea got the gold, and I mean they've gotten the gold really most every year since then too. But I was just saying, Korea would be the perfect place to learn archery, and to practice it and such. And I bought 2 bows. I bought a full-size bow from the. Oh, what I'm trying to remember the name of the company. It's a company. I don't even think the company exists anymore.
Maybe 성무궁?
No. It was a Yangung. No. No. Actually, I think it was Samyang.
삼화.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, Samhwa. Right. As I said, it was a long time ago. I bought two bows. One a full size takedown for myself, and a smaller takedown for my son. And then it was like, okay, now where do we shoot? And we were just looking for any place where we had a little bit of distance. And I even shot on our campus. I found a place, but then there ended up being too many cars having to go by all the time. And I said, this is not working. And I had an assistant, a faculty assistant, and I asked him. I was actually complaining to him. I said, there's no place for me and my son to shoot our bows around here. And he looked at me and says, did you ever think of Korean traditional archery? No. What is it? He said, there's a club about a 5-minute drive from campus. So we got in my car and we drove, and that was to the Gyeongju Horimjeong. The Horimjeong is the name of the club in the city of Gyeongju. And we drove over there, and they were having a competition at the time. And my assistant and I, we just watched it for a while. I had absolutely no idea what was going on. But it was just, okay, that's fun. That's interesting. And then when there was a break, I said, well, let's talk to somebody. So we went and started talking to some of the archers. And it was actually a very, very interesting talk. My Korean was terrible at that time. And so my assistant was doing all the translating. And so I was running things through him, and then it was kind of circular for a while. And I was thinking, this is kind of interesting. And before I knew it, I was signed up to become a member of Gyeongju Horimjeong.
No return.
Yeah, believe me, it really was that way. And so right after the beginning of the year, 1993, right after the beginning of the year, I paid my dues. You had a one-time. All clubs in Korea are different. They all manage their clubs differently. But at Horimjeong, you had an initiation fee, which back then was 300,000 won, which today's money would be probably quite a bit more. But that's just a one-time fee, and then you have your monthly dues and everything that you'd have to pay. Anyway, I signed up, and then it was like, okay, where do I start? So the beginning of 1993, I was assigned the master archer of the club as my teacher, which was a very good thing. And his English was not great, but we communicated okay with my broken Korean and his broken English. We communicated. But he said to me, I know you have shot a bow before, but now I want you to forget everything. You have to pretend like you've never touched a bow in your life, because Korean archery and Western style archery are very different. The only thing that's the same is they both use a bow and an arrow. That's it. After that, there's really nothing that's the same. So I had to do that. I had to pretend like, okay, I've never touched a bow before. And usually with a new member at any club, it's months before you actually shoot an arrow. It is. It takes because you have to go through all of their basics, which involves learning how to string a bow, drawing the bow back and holding it in position, and then letting up on it. And then eventually you progress up to shooting a tethered arrow, an arrow that is by a string tethered to a very tall pole. So a returning arrow is what it ends up being. And then after you've done that for enough time and your form improves and everything, then finally you get to shoot a live arrow at a target. Now, in Korean traditional archery, the targets are 145 meters distant, 159 yards. So that's really a good distance to have to shoot something. The targets are 2.67 meters tall by 2 meters wide. They're tilted back at about a 15-degree angle. But at 145 meters, they look like a postage stamp. And so you're shooting at this postage stamp down the field. Well, when you finally do get that chance where you're going to be shooting an arrow, a live arrow at a target, it's like, okay, let's see how this is. And all right, you have to kind of remember, all right, here's what I was taught, for my form and my draw, my release. And let's see what happens with the arrow. And I'll tell you, when I took my first shots, they were everywhere. I was, it was like, jump, get out of the way. It was awful. As somebody who had shot a bow before, I was embarrassed, really, truly. But over time, my teacher, he was very patient with me, and he was watching what I was doing, making good criticisms about, okay, you're doing this correctly. No, don't do that. Some of the biggest things I would do is do it's called snap shooting, which is where you draw back and you before you're even at anchor, which is where you have to stop. Before you're even at anchor, you let go really quickly, and you're never going to hit anything that way because your mind and your body have to merge. So I had to get over my snap shooting. That was one of my biggest problems. My form was not bad, but it still needed improvement. Anyway, it was like in 40 days, I really made a big transformation. I was going to the club almost every day, and I'd spend a couple hours there. Sometimes it was just warming up and stretching and such, and then finally, right, going out and shooting. And there are progressions in Korean traditional archery. The first one is when you make your first hit. You hit the target for the first time. Now you got to understand the rules in Korean traditional archery is you have 5 arrows. And in an end, you have 5 arrows in an end. And if there are other people shooting, everybody goes through the first arrow, second arrow, third arrow, fourth arrow, fifth arrow. And the whole purpose is just hitting the face of the target without going past the plane of the target. And you can hit the target anywhere on the face. It doesn't matter. If it hits, it's a point. Anywhere. And it really was not easy for a beginner to do that. But eventually, it happens. It happens for everybody eventually. Now, when you get your first hit, and of course, every club has its own rules, but when you get your first hit, you are responsible for buying drinks for the entire club. Oh, well, But everybody does it. Everybody does it. And I did. I forgot how much I had to buy and bring in and such, but it was many bottles of beer and a lot of beer, soju, dongdongju, makgeolli. There's a lot of alcohol. Korean archers love their alcohol. Anyway, that was my first hit, and that's how it was celebrated. And then after that, you make 2 hits, and when you do that, you don't have the celebration like you did with your first one, but still people give you congratulations and everything. Then you have 3 hits, and then you get 4 hits, and people start getting really anxious. Ooh, because when the time comes that you get 5 out of 5, you hit the target 5 times out of 5 tries, that is what we call a molgi. A molgi is a perfect end. And when that happens, it's probably the most transformative thing in the club for a member, because when you get that, you are now considered to be a veteran archer. And at that point, everything is marked down. When you get a molgi, everything at the club stops. And whoever was present, they sign an affidavit usually that I saw this happen, and then it's like, okay, what time? What's the day? What's the time? It all gets marked down. And then, usually at the following club meeting, the club, and again, it depends on the club. Not all clubs do this, but at the Horimjang, it was this way. At the club, it will put on a banquet for you, a huge banquet, and a ceremony. And I'll never forget any of this that happened to me. Now I made my chut molgi, as it's called in Korea, and I made that March 25th, 1993. And that was actually kind of an auspicious day, because March 25th. Did you ever hear of a Native American called Ishi? Well, Ishi, he was sometimes called the last wild Indian in America. Now, it's kind of special for me because my father's side of the family is Native. The Anishinaabe, the Odawa, Ojibwa tribes. So this was kind of special because March 25th, 1916 is when Ishi died. So I made my first molgi on the death anniversary of Ishi. So I always thought that to me that was kind of a special time. But the next month for our meeting, that was going to be my banquet called a molgi janchi. So the molgi festival. And it involves a lot of food, tons of food, a lot of drinks, of course. And I don't have to pay for this. This is paid for by the club, which is a good thing because back then it was, it was like $1.1 million for this festival. So I'm glad I didn't have to pay for it. But anyway, I had to dress up all in hanbok. As a matter of fact, I had to dress up in the. You've probably seen when people have a traditional marriage here, and the regalia that they wear for the marriage. Well, I had the basically it looks like the groom's side of that. So I had to dress up in all of that, and then went through a very, very long ceremony, which involved a lot of bowing to an altar, basically, that had a pig's head on the altar, along with all kinds of other Korean foods and such. And then I also had to greet all the other, and all the members would greet all, they would also go through their part of the ceremony, and we ended up doing a lot of bowing to each other at that point. But here's the thing, is that when the ceremony is done, you are given, it's usually chosen by the director of the club, you are given your archery nickname, your muho. Now, my muho is Chungho, which means Blue Lake. And the reason why it was given to me by the director of my club is because I'm from Michigan, the Great Lakes state, the 5 Great Lakes. And so he thought, oh, that's a good muho for you. So Chungho became mine. And I'm still very proud of that muho. I use it once in a while as a online nickname frequently. Either as Blue Lake or Chungho. Probably if you search around on the internet, you'll probably find things like that. But anyway, you get that. Now, even though you become what's known as a jupjang means you have passed your molgi, your 5 perfect arrows. But even though you are now officially a jupjang, still the club will look at you kind of sideways until you do it again. That's called a hwakin molgi, meaning to be certain molgi. We want to make sure that this wasn't just a fluke, that you by accident got a molgi, so they want to see it again. And once you get that, everyone goes, okay, all right. Yeah, this is a true jupjang in that case. And I do have to say that over the years, I've had many, 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 many molgis. And that's a good thing. It's always nice when you do it again, and you're kind of telling yourself, okay, all right, I still got it. And then, you're generally presented with a very nicely done hand in calligraphy on hanji, the traditional paper and everything. You're, as my teacher called it, he says, this is your license. I guess not a license to kill, but it's your license. I still have it somewhere. Through all the moves and everything, things got kind of packed away. But anyway, that was, it was basically 40 days from just starting until I got my chutmolgi. Different people are different. Some get it really soon. Some it might take months or even years before they get their first one. It all depends on the person and how much effort you put into this and everything. Then the next thing that goes along with this is competition. Because, it's nice to go out and just shoot a bow, but it's also nice to see, how do I stack up against everybody else? Now, Korean traditional archery is both an individual sport and a team sport. It's both. And personally, I also look at it, you're really, truly, though, competing against yourself. It's like, how can I better myself doing this? And when you do your first competition, it's really kind of an amazing time, because especially if you've never done it before, for one thing, you tend to get a little bit of stage fright because everybody's watching you, and especially if it's a really big competition. Now, my first competition was in a very small place called Hunghae, which is right next to the city of Pohang. And I couldn't have had probably a worse place to have my first competition. But in a way, it was probably the best. It was the worst place, and it was the best place. Now, it was not very good for somebody who's just a beginner. But it was really a nice place for one reason, and it's because if you ever shot Korean traditional archery before, you've probably shot at places like this, but you're standing on the side of a mountain. Your target is on another mountain. Underneath is a valley, and there are farmers working in the fields right beneath you. And that was a very strange thing, shooting over people. But that particular club, that was how they were set up. Most clubs are not like that. But that was where I had my first competition. It was actually a very strange competition. Very windy. And so my arrows were, again, going everywhere, just mainly because of the wind. And it was really hard to bring things in. I wasn't hitting anything except mountain. But then there are other things that happened on that particular day. Your first one you're always going to remember just because it was your first. But also on that particular day, there was an incident that happened that I'll never forget. It was the winter time. Or at least it was a really cold time, I should say. And now the competition actually happened before I got my mulgi. I was competing before I got that. And so that's right, really cold, very wintry like. And when archers aren't shooting, they're usually drinking, eating, talking for certain.
Not anymore.
Yeah. Things are back then. Yeah, things have changed a lot over the years. But at this time, it was a very strange thing because they had this big burn barrel, and that's where everybody was going to warm their hands up and such. Well, there were some coffee ladies who came. They were hired to come there and make coffee for all the archers and everything. And they had their little burners that they got the water going on and stuff. Well, one thing is that, and this one particular time, when one of these ladies, when her gas can was empty, she threw it into the burn barrel. A butane, empty, but still a butane can that still has something in it. Threw it into the burn barrel. Nobody knew that. And these guys were, warming up their hands and trying to warm their face a little bit. All of a sudden, boom! Everybody hit the ground. And if it wasn't so dangerous, it would have been humorous. It was because it was just like a cartoon. Guys with their faces blackened, hair was singed. One guy had no eyebrows left. The coffee ladies, they got out of there really quickly because nobody was happy. It was like, you're in trouble. So that, I remember, it's like, boy, I really had a memorable first competition, watching a couple of my fellow members almost get killed, that was as just the singed hair and such, and everybody's nerves were kind of like this. Anyway, I'm sure that when you guys if you guys ever get into competition or something, I'm sure you probably won't have that problem. But anyway, competition. Just to give you a little quick idea about what a competition is, most places will usually have 3 shooting areas and 3 targets down at the end. Some clubs might have fewer. You might have 2 or even possibly 1 target. But many of the clubs around Korea will have 3 positions. And probably each position will be having a group of archers shooting. And as I said, it goes one archer after the other. So and it goes from left to right. So position 1, 2, 3, and usually 5 positions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. sometimes more. You might have 6, 7, 8 even positions. But anyway, each archer in turn will shoot at the target. And there's a target judge who's down at the end of the field. And that judge usually will have a flag and will be off to the side, of course. And then if the arrow hits the target, the flag gets put in a circle like that, okay? And then you might even hear somebody exclaim, "Kwanjungyo!" which is just basically saying bullseye. Well, because Kwanjung is hitting the target basically. Anyway, if the arrow falls short, the flag judge usually give a little sweeping motion like this. If it goes over, it'll be a sweeping motion up here usually, or just sometimes just a one thing like this that just shows here. If it goes off to the sides, like this. So the target judge is just showing what the arrow did. And this goes on until all 5 arrows are expended by each of the archers within an end. And then you'll have 3 ends. So 15 arrows total, and then however many hits you have out of that 15, and then there will also be team competitions. So individual competition, team competition, and then when you get down with the team competition, when you get to the end of everything, you'll usually, if it's a big competition you're at, they'll come down to semifinals, quarterfinals, finals, like that. And if you have two teams or 2 archers, if it's the individual or the team, you'd have a sudden death. So whoever misses first loses, type thing. So that's usually what happens during a competition. Competitions, when you have a competition, they'll go on all day, from beginning in the morning until it's dark. When it turns dark, they'll usually turn on the lights. So you're shooting in the dark. There are also a lot of informal competitions. You'll have your competition within your club, which are just kind of informal ones. Usually sometimes maybe in some friendly wagering, who's gonna buy the beer tonight, wagering type thing. And so on. Now, that's just a little explanation about the life in a club. Now, one thing I do want to mention is I actually have not been active in the past few years because I've just been so busy teaching at the university and just getting a lot of other things done. But like with Freddie and such, I sell bows around the world, so people are always contacting me for things, and I sell them bows that I contract with, and sometimes when I don't have something, I send them over to Freddie. Freddie usually has things when I don't have them. Freddie and I have known each other for many, many, many years, and we've had a really great personal and professional relationship. So it's been great, still going great.